Good morning, this is Sarah Parker, and this is a quick video demonstrating homework assignment 1 for CPSC 5590, and the assignment was to create a client socket and a server socket that can communicate with each other. For this assignment, I used Python to write the code, and for demonstration purposes, this will be demonstrated on my local computer. However, I did modify it so that I could communicate with our desktop computer as well, so the two computers could talk to each other. But I couldn't get the camera set up to show that very clearly. But I'll show you how that would be modified in the code. But for right now, it's just set up to run on my local machine. So to create the client socket, the assignment was for the client socket to request a TCP connection to the server and then create the socket and then send the name of the client plus a number. And then that would be added to a number that's already pre-coded in the server, create the sum, and then print the sum back to the client. So it's taking a client number, adding it to the server number, and then the server is sending that sum back to the client. So you have this two-way communication between the two programs. So for the client socket, we're going to first ask for an integer of 1 to 100. Anything else will shut down the server. So that's just our shutdown signal. And essentially, if it's not in between 1 and 100, then it's just going to go ahead and send the number 999, which just forces an out of range number. You could send the original integer, but this just makes it a little bit cleaner. We're going to connect to our host, which is just our local computer. And I chose port 8018, just a large port that was unused on my computer. We're going to create our socket using the socket library that comes with Python. So we're creating it, and we're going to use our server host and our server port, which is these two right here, and that'll connect to the server. So the socket sends a message over to the server, it requests a connection, and then it will receive back. We're going to send our name and our number, and that's going to be that integer that we input at the beginning, and then we're going to encode the message and send it. If it's out of range, then it will just send it back to us that the server didn't reply and the server may have shut down. Otherwise, it's going to parse the information back from the server that the message our reply that was sent. So that'll strip out our server number, our server name, and then it'll do the sum. So it should print out the results, which will be our name, the server name, and then our number plus the server number, and then what that sum is. Otherwise, we have an exception if the connection was refused. On the server side, we have our host set to 0.0.0, and I had done that originally so that I could communicate with the desktop and it would allow any incoming IP address. Same port, we want to make sure we're listening on the same port, and the number that I chose for the server was 15. So anything coming from the client should get added to 15, and then our results will print. So we're going to create our server socket. Same thing, using the Python socket library. And then we're going to bind it. We're going to ensure that it goes to this host and this port number, and then it's listening. So our server is always on and it's always listening once the program is running. Once it gets that request from the client, then it'll show us who we're connected to, and then it's going to allow the data to come through. That's that client name and the client number. Again, it's going to strip out that information to make it a little bit cleaner. If it's not in a valid format, it'll close the connection. If it's not in our range, that 1 to 100 range, then it'll close that socket down, and it'll close our server down as well. Then it'll print the number of the client that was sent, our server number, and it'll print the sum, and then it'll send that back to our client. So to show this, down here in our terminal, I have the client socket running on the left-hand side, and I have our server socket on the right-hand side. So you can see that it says that it's currently listening on 0.0.0.0 port 8018. So it's on. It's just waiting for information to come from our client. Initially, we'll go ahead and do a valid number. We'll do 22, which should result in a sum of 37. So we'll hit enter, and it shows that we were connected on our local host, our 127. And then our client number is 22, and then we added 15, so our sum is 37, which is correct. And we can verify that on the client side, which also shows that that information was the same. If we run the program again and we do an out of range number, I'll say 789, then you can see that it was connected. So our initial handshake worked, but then it received the wrong number. It received an out of range number, so it shut the server down. And then over on our client side, it shows that there was no reply, the server shut down, which is exactly what we wanted to do. For the extra credit, I created a threaded server. So I'm going to jump over to that code. And a threaded server basically allows multiple connections. So it allows our one connection, our TCP connection, the initial one, to stay open, and then it creates a new thread for each subsequent request. And the way that we did this is we created a function that's called handle client, which does the same thing that it did before. So it receives all that information from the client, prints it out or shuts it down. It displays all the information. It's a little junky looking, but same information. And then it sends that response back. The difference, though, is that we create a loop. So we have our socket that we've created, we've bound it to our host and our port, and it's currently listening. And then we put it into a try and a while true loop. So this is going to, while we have a connection, any subsequent connection gets a new thread created, and that's right here. And then the target is the handle client. So it's going to handle our client up here. It's putting our function down here, and then our arguments are here. So let me go ahead and get the server running. So same thing, it's still listening on the same IP address and the same port. This was, well, I'll go back to that, but we'll go ahead and start our client server over here. That has not changed. And we can run our initial server. So we'll do 55 this time. So the sum is 97, and you can see that it's staying open, but it would actually create a new thread when I ran the program again. We'll do 22 this time. And so we get the same information. It's just that it's being spawned off of a new thread, because while that's true, while we have our initial socket open, that's being created there. Okay, let me go back real briefly to our server socket. So right here, so like I said, we set it to 0.0.0 so that it would listen for any IP address. So this is on my local area Wi-Fi, which is why I can connect to it. Over here in the client socket, this is what we would change. Instead of our 127.0.1, we would look for the IP address from the desktop, which I found using the IP config on command prompt, got that IP address, and I added it here. So then I pulled up the server program on my desktop and had that running, and then I ran the client socket from the laptop, and the results were the exact same, but it basically allowed my IP address to communicate with the desktop IP address because we're connecting it specifically to that IP address in our socket. So that is a brief overview of how to create sockets for a client and a server, and how to just send basic messages back and forth with them. Thank you.